plotting are not friends. 3-act story structure, 50% of the rest of it is act 2. Did I just say act 2? Okay. Cat saves the day or something. Those are things that I need to work on this week. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Brenda and this is Reading by Myshelf. This week I am focusing on plotting, and I've talked a little bit about this in my previous writing vlogs, but me and plotting are not friends, to say it nicely. I hate plotting. I'm not good at plotting. I'm much better at pantsing, writing by the seat of my pants, figuring things out as I go. And so I have mentioned before that generally how I begin writing is I have an idea, it's very surface level, and I just start writing. I do this to familiarize myself with the characters and the world. I feel like my mind is much more open and creative when I'm just kind of going with the flow and seeing where the story takes me on its own. And that is definitely how I like to get started. And I have found that I write myself into corners, or I lose the meat of my story because I don't plot it out. So that is what I am attempting to do this week, is to really sit down and focus on plotting out at least the main, most important plot points. There is the 3-act story structure that is pretty well known in the writing circle, writing community. There's Act 1, in which the hook grabs the attention of your reader. It is kind of exploring the inner conflict within your main character, and it also begins the setup portion, and then the inciting incident. Something occurs that puts your protagonist out of their comfort zone. You have your build-up, which the protagonist is going to have to face this conflict head on. And then you have your first plot point, which the protagonist makes a decision that determines what happens next. And your first pinch point, the opposition or antagonist force looms in the distance. That's all in Act 1. Act 2, you're having your pre-midpoint. Something is standing in the way of your protagonist on their quest, on their journey in getting through this conflict. This is also the midpoint, where there's a plot twist, where kind of everything changes or gets flipped on its head. It isn't what it first seemed that it was. Then you have your post-midpoint action hero. This switches gears to goal because of a twist. So the goal changes at some point, at this point, because of a twist, an unforeseen twist that has occurred. You have your second pinch point, where your antagonist gets closer to disrupting the protagonist's life. That is on Act 2. Act 2 has also kind of been known as the longer section and the more challenging section for most authors to write, because there is more. So a quarter is usually Act 1, a quarter of your story is usually Act 3, and then that leaves about 50% of your story to happen within Act 2, which is a challenge because, you want the tension to constantly be increasing. You want to imagine it as a graph, a storyline that is constantly, the tension is increasing, right? So by the time you get to Act 3, this is where your climax is going to occur. So much else has had to happen in between. And that is where I myself get caught up. So Act 3, you have a supposed victory in which your protagonist feels confident that they are going to be victorious, but what really happens is some sort of disaster, right? Something goes wrong. The reader kind of saw it, but maybe the protagonist didn't. This leads to a dark moment where the protagonist feels lost, hopeless, and fear kind of comes into play again. They start, doubting themselves or doubting the outcome. Then there must be a recovery. They must overcome some false belief to continue on to the climax. And this is the crucial character development portion for your main character. This is where they need to face their internal conflict and overcome that need that maybe they didn't even know they needed. Then you have your climactic confrontation, in which the protagonist faces the biggest challenge of all, whether that be within the journey itself or the antagonist, whatever because you can have man versus man versus society, man versus nature. I mean, there's so many forms of antagonists that could happen in your story. Then you have your victory, in which your protagonist wins the day, and the resolution, where all the loose ends are wrapped up. So that is, I think, kind of what I stick to. I mean, there are plenty of other plotting guides that you can use. There's the cat one, Cat Saves the Day or something. I don't even know. I think there's a website, and if I can find it, I will add it here and in the description box down below. But in my creative writing program, they actually don't really talk a whole lot of plotting. I mean, they go over some of the basics, but they don't really tell you how to do it. They just kind of give you some pointers and let you go off on your own.
It is cold, it's windy, it's gross, but I've done it. I've plotted. I used the 3-act story structure and did a very rough, basic plot of each act. So I think I have the meat of it kind of in order and down. It may change, of course, I think that's a given. But progress. And it really didn't take me that long because, like I said, I already had the ending in mind, and I just needed to kind of narrow down the middle. So onward.
So they do say that every story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You should have some mystery that keeps the tension in place and keeps the reader invested in your story. In the beginning, you need to have your initial action, situation, and problem that needs to be solved. The middle of your story is rising action. The plot thickens as the character pursues his goal. And then, the end. By the end, you need to think, how can I raise the stakes? What is going to be the most climactic and compelling ending to a story that I can write with these characters that I have created. Another important aspect of storytelling is through your perspective, your point of view, and also the chronological setup of your story, because every story does not need to be told in chronological order. Some stories may open with an action scene that places the protagonist within his or her skill set before the story actually begins. But it is good advice to say that you should always start your story, they call it in media res, so in the middle of things, in the middle of the action. Placing your character in a crisis situation at the start of your story is always good advice. Then, of course, you can always use flashbacks, or you can some people will start at the end of their story. And so the reader knows what's going to happen, but they then want to find out how they get there. And so that is the meat of their story. When you're considering point of view and the perspective that you want to tell your story from. These are often things that you want to consider because it will define the limits of what can be known and understood by both the narrator and the reader, which has major implications for the degree of suspense or mystery or simple, just interest. Also, considering that knowability raises the issue of reliability. So if you're telling a story in first person, they could be encountering an unreliable narrator. Is that something you want? So in first person, you have the opportunity for the unreliable narrator, but it also allows for you to really give your reader a personalized experience and actually draw them into this relationship of apparent intimacy between the perspective and the reader. Second person, using second person, you absolutely implicate the reader because the story is told in you, as in you were there, you saw this, you did this. So they have to participate imaginatively in the events that are happening. It's a shared experience between the book and the reader, but has also been known to be notoriously hard to sustain throughout an entire novel. Now you have third person, which comes in a few forms, one being the omniscient, which the narrator has no limits as to what they know. They are watching from above. They are like the all-knowing director of the story. They can kind of range freely between time and space. They can visit different locations. They can be in the mind of several characters, all the characters, and they may even remember things that are forgotten. Then you have the third person limited, in which the narrator appears to know everything about one character only. The narrative voice inflected or colored by the personality or the psychology of the central character. It allows you to achieve some of the immediacy and personality of the first person perspective, but also maintain authority and flexibility of third person. Then you have third person objective. The other thing to consider is whether what temporal dimension you want to use, because that will determine the grammatical tense in which your story is told. So past, present, future. Are you telling your story in retrospect with a distance of time offering hindsight? Are you telling your person in present tense where everything is happening simultaneously and presently? Then you have the future tense, which allows for it's in anticipation of events yet to come. So some of the questions that you may want to ask yourself are: does your beginning situate your protagonist in a definite time and place? Does your protagonist have a dilemma? What is the inciting incident that creates a complication? What are the events that follow? Are these events causally connected? Do they involve conflict? Is this conflict internal or external, or both? In what ways does the protagonist change or develop? This is a very important one. Is there a definite narrative climax? And what is the resolution? One thing that I found that is important when writing your climax is to introduce elements that are designed to purposely mislead and entertain your reader. They are not strictly necessary to the telling of the story, but have some sort of justification. And also, as far as character goes, you have obviously your main character who is going to be dynamic. A dynamic character undergoes significant change in the journey. Their crises, they constitute the meat and substance of your narrative. So this is obviously going to be your main character, but you can also have subplots in which other characters who may not be your main character also undergo significant change, and they can be dynamic as well. But you will have many static characters who remain the same throughout the story, and they don't have any development arc or character arc, and they are still very important, obviously, to the story. So that being said, those are things that I need to work on this week, and I will share with you what I can. I don't want to, I'm not, like I said, I'm giving away some points of my story as I'm doing these vlogs, but I don't want to give away everything. So I will speak in vague and broad terms, but I will still share with you kind of what I've done, what I'm doing, and my goals. So yeah, let's get to it. Side note, I ordered a new desk chair. The one that I have right now is hot garbage, and I have been suffering with like some pretty hardcore lower back pain. And so the new chair is supposed to come today. I'm super freaking excited. This is what I have now. I mean, this thing, like, there's no back support. I had to get this pad to help, like, because it's so hard and it was hurting my tailbone. So the desk that the chair that I ordered is supposed to be ergonomic and has lumbar support and a headrest, and here's hoping that it does the trick, because with the amount of time I spend sitting at my desk, you know, either doing school stuff, writing, editing, anything like that, I mean, something's gotta give. So stay tuned for the new chair. I'm excited. Let's try it out. Here she is. I mean, you know, nothing fancy, but I don't know. I'm not super impressed. I'll get back to you. Rainy, gross. But we're headed to Exchange Coffee Company today, and I am going to work on continuing the story and writing. I did plotting this week, so I want to kind of set some of that out in my document. So I use Word, and in Word I create chapters using the headings, and so it will, if you go to the view in the navigation pane, you can navigate by your headings, which will be my chapters. And so I use that as kind of a guide to kind of remember each section in my plot, kind of, so I know what is meant to happen in that chapter. Yeah, so I can show you that when I get there and I pull up the document. I'll just show you the navigation pane with the chapters that I have set up right now, and you know, I add to them as I go if I need to, but they are kind of a rough little guide. And I think I forgot to mention that I am using third person limited as my narrative structure POV, and I am telling it mainly through my main character Alice, but also through her partner Xander. I think those are the names I'm going to stick with. I kind of toyed around with changing them, but that's where we are right now. And then there is also Alice's sister, Amara, and she only has one chapter right now. And so I will use her, but sparingly. She won't be appearing too much. But yeah, so I will check back in when I get to the coffee shop. And real quick, I did write about 500 words on Wednesday. Today's Friday, so I'm hoping for another 1,500 just to kind of make up for last week when I fell a little short, but we'll see. I mean, you know, no stress. This is the day. It's supposed to be rainy all day, which I thought that it was supposed to actually have some sun, but yeah, no, I checked the weather and it's just a crappy raining day. But we're getting out of the house anyway, and I'm going to a different cafe. I've been here before, actually about 2 years ago, and it was very quaint and cute. I'm hoping that it's not quite as crowded as the one that I went to last week, but we'll see. I wrote like 1,000 words. I was happy with what I wrote though, and I stuck with what I had plotted out, and I started the next chapter. So I'm feeling pretty good about it, even though I kind of haven't been meeting the word counts that I've been setting for myself, but I'm not going to get too stressed out about that. I'm just going to go with it and let it flow and just be happy that I'm getting words on the page at this point. I am hoping this is the last week of my class, and then I'm done. I'm graduating. So I will have more time to spend writing on my own personal projects, I hope. And so that will, I don't know, relieves the stress, any stress that I feel about not meeting like my kind of little arbitrary word count goals for each week at this point. Although last night I did apply for an internship at a publishing house, at a literary agency, and I don't necessarily expect anything to come out of that. It's so hard to get into the publishing industry in any kind of professional position. I keep trying, but I don't have high hopes. So in the meantime, I am just focusing on my writing and graduating. I had thought about applying to the certificate program at the University of Chicago for their editing certificate, which I still might do. It's like an 8-course program, and you can pick different areas to focus on, like developmental editing, line and copywriting. So there's like different areas that you can focus. It is very well known, and they use the Chicago manual style, which they produce, and is one of the go-to editing types that publishers use. So I think that would be very beneficial to me if I decide to do that, but I do need to have my degree. I need to have that in hand, because you need to have your bachelor's before you will get accepted into that certificate program. Anyway, I'm kind of going off on a spiel here that really has nothing to do with plotting. Well, I mean, I guess it does, right? Developmental editing, that is probably what I would choose, is the developmental editing piece. I think it would be great, not only for my own writing purposes, but also to work as an editor helping other authors produce finished pieces. So that's the goal. I would love to do that. So I will let you know. I may write a little bit more this weekend, like I always say. Who knows? It's going to be rainy, I think, so that may mean that I have more time in the house in front of the computer. So that's the week. That's plotting. My arch nemesis, my antagonist, my external conflict. That's my first person perspective. That's it. See ya.